All right. Hello again, adventurers, and welcome to another exciting daily vlog. This is daily vlog number 285. And today, I want to talk about NOT D&D. So I really love D&D. However, sometimes I just don't want to play D&D or something like D&D. I want something completely different that doesn't feel like D&D, that doesn't make me go, oh, this is D&D in space, or D&D in the West, or D&D but more gritty D&D, or D&D but they just added a shit ton of more rules. I want something that plays nothing like D&D, that when I'm doing things, I'm not going, oh, this is just D&D, but they changed this aspect. Something that feels wholly unique. So, figured for today, I would talk about a few systems that exist right now that do not play anything like D&D. Now, to define what I mean by that, in general, these systems are going to, first of all, not have 6 attributes. And the basic mechanic, like when you're playing D&D, as far as what you're actually doing, basically you take a D20, you roll it, you add some numbers, and you generally try to either tie or get higher than a number, and the way that you figure out what to add to the D20 is based on those 6 attributes and generally a list of skills. So, the games that I'm going to talk about are not going to be attribute plus skill added to D20 style games, and the majority of them are not going to be specifically fantasy based, just to have games that just don't feel like D&D in any way, shape, or form. Now, this is not me saying that D&D is a horrible game. Like I said, I like D&D. However, every so often you want to play something really, really different. And by playing these games, I have learned things that I use in my D&D games to make them better. So, yeah. This is not an exhaustive list. There are a lot of different game systems out there. I just picked a few that I actually own, that looking through them, I felt really didn't feel like D&D. Oh, I guess one other thing we should clarify about what I consider D&D. D&D is a class-based RPG. So most of these are not going to be a class-based RPG in the way that D&D is, where it's, race, class, background, and stuff like that. Some of them will have classes or the equivalent of classes. Sorry, something on my monitor here. Some of them will have classes or like the equivalent of classes, but they're going to play very differently. So, that being said, let's talk about different systems. And these are going to go mostly in alphabetical order because I have them in alphabetical order in my folder. That's all it is. Alright, so the first game, the Cipher System. The Cipher System was created by Monty Cook Games, and originally it was created for a game called Numenera. Numenera still exists. It's a fantastic game system, and since Numenera, they've created the generic Cipher System, and then there's been a bunch of other games that all use the Cipher System. The Strange, there's a lot now. The Strange is one of my favorites. The thing that makes the Cipher System not D&D is probably best explained by the character creation system. In D&D, You have, when you create your character, you pick a race, you pick a class, you pick a background. In the Cypher system, you write a sentence. Name is an adjective, noun, who, verbs. That's the basics of all Cypher system games. Is you'll have a name for your character. So if I was creating me in the Cypher system, it'd be TJ is an adjective, noun, who, verbs. The Cypher system is technically quote unquote class based. You have the noun part is called your type, and so there are, depending on which version of the Cypher system that you are using. The generic Cypher system, there are 4 types. There's the warrior, there's the adept, there's the explorer, and there's the speaker. And if you wanted to relate it to your more traditional class-based systems, your warrior is your standard fighter style thing. Adept is going to be kind of your magic user. Explorer is going to be closer to like a ranger rogue-ish. And then speaker is going to be closer to like a bard or a face style character. But instead of having 6 attributes that you use to kind of add to your rolls, you actually only have 3. You have a might pool, a speed pool, and an intellect pool. And having a larger might pool doesn't mean that you're stronger. It means you can use your might more often, because that's the other big thing that makes the Cypher system different. The Cypher system, you don't add anything to your D20 rolls. And you don't need all of the the polyhedral dice. For the Cypher system, quite literally, for most of the game, you only need, these are my official Cypher system dice, you only need a D20, and then every so often, you will roll a D6. Now, if you're a game master, you will probably need a set of percentile dice, because there are quite a few different times where you need to roll on tables and things like that that are set up for percentiles. Things like handing out ciphers and things like that, they require the percentile to the dice. But for players, a single D6 and a single D20 is all you will ever need. And so when you play, you actually use your might, speed, and intellect pools as resources. They work as your hit points. They work as your spell points. They are just about everything, and each one tends to be used to do different things. So having a larger speed pool does not mean you're quote-unquote faster, but it does mean that you can do speed-based tasks more often. And it generally means that you can use more speed-based abilities more often, or more expensive speed-based abilities, without having to worry about your speed pool gone. The rest of the things, the adjective is... going back to here so I can see what I want. The adjective is called your descriptor. And your descriptor is going to be kind of exactly what it sounds like. It's going to describe your character. A lot of descriptors, and I'm actually going to get a list here. To give you an example of some descriptors, there are things like brash, impulsive, inquisitive, risk-taking, mechanical, vicious, virtuous, naive, doomed, empathic, foolish. They are literally descriptors that describe how your character interacts with the world. It's compared to something like D&D, where your race, which is the kind of equivalent, literally just describes physically what you are. You know, who your parents were, that's basically what the race describes, and how you physically are. And the final thing, your focus, is another way how you interact with the world. To give you some more examples of different focuses or foci, depending on how you want to pronounce it. Where are my choosing focus? There we are. They use foci. So, a few of the foci. Battles robots. Defends the weaks. Defends the weaks. Yes, defends the weaks from those evil people that want to subdivide them. Or the dreaded daylight savings times. No, defends the weak. Builds robots. flies faster than a bullet, exists in 2 places at once, leads, keeps a magic ally, masters defense, pilots StarCraft, plays too many games. Again, these are all things about what your character physically does, what their focus in life is, what makes them unique compared to everybody else that's kind of similar to them. So your descriptor describes kind of how your character feels, how they view the world. Your focus describes how your character interacts with the world and their specific niche in the world. And your type is kind of the thing that describes how you physically exist in the world. What are the things that you tend to do best? It's a really brilliant system. And again, because you never add anything to the die, whenever you're modifying rolls, what you actually do is you actually increase or decrease the number you have to roll. So things like adding effort to a roll. You spend some points from one of your pools to add effort, and it goes from like a difficulty 5 check, which would normally require you to roll a 15, down to a difficulty 4 check, which only requires you to roll a 12. So really fun system. The generic version of it, which is just called the Cypher system, can be used for any style of game. So if you wanted to play a high fantasy game, they've got it. You can definitely do that. However, if you want to play a science fiction game, if you want to play a Wild West, if you want to play a modern game, post-apocalyptic, they actually have an entire section of the Cypher system rulebook called Genres, which adds specific rules and stuff like that for particular genres. And the genres that they list here are fantasy, modern, science fiction, horror, romance, superheroes, post-apocalyptics, fairy tale, and historical. So yeah, it's a great system. Love it to death. Moving on. The next system is the 2D20 system. And I'm specifically going to be looking at Dune Adventures in the Imperium. Modifius created a system. I can't remember what the first system that they used it for. Do I still have it here? No, I don't have that one anymore. Wait, if we go here. Yeah. So yeah, I'm not sure which one was first, but the 2D20 system is used for Dune, Adventures in the Imperium, Fallout the RPG, Achtung Cthulhu, I don't know what that is, and then Star Trek Adventures, which they now have a second edition of. And the basics of the 2D20 system, specifically how it's implemented in Dune, is it's what I refer to as a dice pool system. Dice pool systems, and I'm not the only person that refers to them like this, but basically a dice pool system is, instead of rolling a d20 or rolling a number of dice and trying to roll above or below a certain number, and that means you win, you have a pool of dice and you roll them, and you still have to roll above or below a number, but instead of going, well, if you roll above, you win, and if you roll below, you use, or something equivalent to that, you get a number of successes. And the difficulty of the task will require you to get a certain number of successes in order to accomplish the task. So unlike something like D&D, where it's a single roll, you go, oh, look, I rolled a 5, I got a +6 to that, so does an 11 beat the task? It doesn't. Okay, I failed. In dice pool systems, you would roll like 2 or 3 of the dice and go, well, I succeeded twice, and this was a difficulty 2 style thing, so I got 2 successes. That means I accomplished the task. And because of that, it means that the game plays a little bit differently. For Dune in particular, the 2D20 system is used to great effect simply because they create a very simple method of resolving conflicts. You have it's the diggies. Let's do this. Let's go here. So you have your drives, you have skills, you add those things together, something akin to that. Skill test. Difficulty. How do you do a skill test? Select one of your skills and one of your drives, add their scores together to make a target number. So basically you have these two different things. I'm not going to go into precise detail, but you have drives, you have skills, and they have numeric values. You add those two numbers together and that creates your target number. You want to match that or be lower than that to get a success. And by default, you roll 2d20 and try to roll under those numbers. Now, there's other things in the game that allow you to buy more dice to make it so that you can have a better chance of getting more successes, and doing things like rolling a 1 on your die counts as a critical success, so that counts as 2 successes. So even if you only have 2d20 and the difficulty requires 3 successes, it doesn't mean that you automatically fail it. There's a bunch of different things that you can do to be able to do that. And because of that, and because of how just kind of basic and simplistic that style of resolution is, they basically can use that for just about any situation. You want combat? Okay, it's still going to be a skill and a drive to make a target number, and then you choose a number of successes. This is going to be more social encounters. We want mass, like army versus army combat. All of those things are resolved with this relatively simple resolution system, along with a few other things that they add into it to, again, allow you to manipulate the odds of succeeding or failing. Things like if you have a focus in a certain skill, that means that you get critical successes on more than just a 1. Things like that to modify statistics and stuff like that. Overall, the only kind of downside of the 2d20 system, Modifius, is the vast majority of the games that use the 2d20 system are licensed games. Which means they're going to be very, very heavily influenced by the license that they're using. Dune is great if you like Dune. If you're not a fan of Frank Herbert in general, or you just don't like Dune or science fiction, you're really not going to like the system, whereas the Cypher system can be so many different things, and generic RPGs in general can be so many different things. Modifius lists Actum, Cthulhu, 2d20, Dishonored, Dreams and Machines, Dune, Fallout, Homeworld, Infinity, John Carter of Mars, and Star Trek Adventures. Again, some of those are a little bit more generic, like Dreams and Machines, but most of them are licensed. So, that being said, let's move on. And I actually have run the Dune RPG, and it's an absolute blast. The next one, which shouldn't be a surprise to anyone that watches this channel, the Essence 20 system. I'm going to use the Power Rangers RPG as an example, but I'm a huge fan of the Essence 20 system. If you're on this channel, you are probably already familiar with the Essence 20 system because a lot of my recent content is Essence 20 focused. However, if for whatever reason you caught this without having seen any of my other videos, welcome to the channel. In the Essence 20 system, it's created by a studio called Renegade Games Studio, and it is a unique RPG system that, unlike D&D, where you have your 6 attributes and then a bunch of skills and things like that, in the Essence 20 system, you have 4 essences, and they are all S words, which I find hilarious. You have strength, speed, smarts, and social. And then underneath those, there's a bunch of different skills. Well, wait a minute. We already told that, we weren't going to have systems where they were just attributes and a list of skills that you just add to a D20 roll. Well, you don't do that in the Essence 20 system. The unique thing about the Essence 20 system is the way that you resolve your rolls is you roll a D20, and then you also roll your skill die. And when you invest in the various skills, it doesn't give you a plus bonus to those skills, it increases the skill die. And if you happen to get a specialization in those, you actually roll all of the skill dice that you've unlocked simultaneously and just pick the one that has the best stat for that, or the highest number for that roll. It makes resolving the thing significantly more interesting, especially since when you're doing things, focuses, there isn't a set list or a specialization, sorry. There isn't a set list of specializations. You can come up with your own specializations. They give you examples, but part of the game is quite literally saying, well, I have this specialization and I think that it applies here because of this. Sometimes it's going to be very, very obvious. Like if you have a specialization in might-based weapons, well, then, if you're using a might-based weapon, you're going to get the specialization on that. But some of them are going to be more unique. Like you have I had a player in my Power Rangers RPG that they had a specialization in, I can't remember what it was. It was something akin to because they were a journalist. It's something akin to journalism or something like that, if I remember correctly. I might be misremembering that. Anyone that's watched the series, feel free to correct me. But it was a very broad specialization that could apply in a lot of different situations, which I liked. I thought it was really, really cool. The other thing that makes the Essence 20 system very, very different and not D&D, despite the fact that it actually started as a conversion, a Power Rangers conversion for D&D 5th edition, is equipment. Unlike the vast majority of RPGs out there, where your equipment, for the most part, just kind of changes what kind of damage you do and how many attacks you get. Most RPGs are going to be like, the difference between a greatsword and a maul is one does slashing damage and one does smashing damage. Like that's really all the difference is. In Essence 20, your equipment is just as much a part of creating your character and specializing them as your stats, your essence scores, your specializations, everything like that. And they have an upgrade system where you can take weapons and add modifications to them to make them play even more differently. And depending on the weapons that you have, you will have, and the equipment in general, not just weapons, but the equipment in general, your character will play very, very differently. So yeah, also Power Rangers. How can you not love Power Rangers? There are other things that use the SS20 system, but Power Rangers. And again, the SS20 system runs into the same problem as the 2D20 system, though even more so currently. The SS20 system is exclusively licensed games currently. There is no generic SS20 system. There is Power Rangers, G.I. Joe, Transformers, My Little Pony, and they're currently doing a backer kit for Welcome to Night Vale. But they are all licensed systems. So if one of those systems is not really your cup of tea, you're probably not going to enjoy the system in and of itself. But it does play very differently than did a D&D, which I like. So, moving on. Let's talk about Fate. Fate is an interesting system. It's created by Evil Hat Productions. And when we're talking about games that are not D&D, it doesn't get quite more not D&D than Fate. In Fate, you do not have attributes. You have aspects. And the aspects in and of themselves are not like strength, dexterity. Aspects are completely created by the players, sometimes at character creations, other times they're created mid-scene. And they're just descriptions of your character. Like an aspect you might have is tempted by shiny things. and depending on how you use them and how they interact, the game is going to work a little bit differently. If I remember correctly, um, it's not technically a quote unquote dice pool system, but it works kind of similarly. You're actually supposed to use very specific dice, which I'm trying to see if they have a name for them. They call them fate dice in here, but there's another kind of generic game name for them. Basically, they're D6s, but instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, two of the faces have blanks, two of the faces have minuses on them, two of the faces have pluses on them. And so you will generally roll a number of dice, so kind of similar to a dice pool system. You will roll a number of dice and then add up the pluses and minuses to get your total. So it's kind of a hybrid between a D20 based system where roll a D20, add a number to it. This is roll a dice pool, count the total amount on it, which you could declare successes because it works kind of similar to a success failure system. And then depending on skills that you have, you can also add a number to it. So it's kind of a hybrid system, but it most definitely plays very, very different from D&D. And then, like I said, you do have skills, and they range from superb skills all the way down to average. And the difference between the skills is basically just how much you get to add to a dice roll if you're using that skill. Like an average skill adds a +1 to a dice roll. A good skill is +3, great is +4, superb is +5, and fair is +2. And again, the skills themselves are not, I don't believe the skills are listed, but I might be wrong. Yeah, so again, everything about the fate system is created by the characters, either at character creation or while they're playing. So you're not going to have, like, in D&D, you have athletics and stealth and medicine and things like that, where you have this set list of skills and everything has to fit into there. In this, your skills are going to be things that your character does well, and you're going to describe them how it makes most sense for your character. You might have an arcane lore skill that you're fair at. You have a fair knowledge of arcane lore. But you also might have a martial arts skill, I guess, which you would be, good at. So anything that, would apply to your martial arts would give you that little bonus. Things like that. So, again, really, really unique system. Very, very kind of narrative and player focused. Which is always, always, always fun. I am going to sneeze. No, I'm not. So here I finally found what it was. You can find the dice in hobby stores, and apparently they were called fudge dice. And yeah, so if you're looking specifically to play Fate and you want to not have to basically go, okay, 1 or 2 is blank, 3 or 4 is a minus, 5 or 6 is a plus, and just treat it, because you can use regular dice for it. But sometimes it's just better to have the actual dice you're supposed to. The dice are called fudge dice. So, yeah. Moving on. The next one, we got to talk about Fabula Ultima. I did a Fabula Ultima campaign this past September. Or not September, December. This past December, I did a Fabula Ultima campaign. It is monumentally fun. The unique things about Fabula Ultima that makes it not D&D. First things first, your well, first things first, there isn't a setting for Fabula Ultima. Part of running a Fabula Ultima game is you have a Session 0, where the players help you create the world that you're going to be adventuring in, which is really interesting. I did a Session 0 for my Fabula Ultima game, and it is some of the most fun I've had world building in tabletop RPGs in general, because it's not just me sitting down going, what do I want my world to be? What do I want these things to do? I got to sit down with all of my players, or most of my players. A few of them couldn't make that game. And just have fun, and we all created our own little places on the map, and it was really, really great. But when we get to characters, you do not have you don't have 6 attributes, you have 4, and your attribute is not measured as a single number. Like your dexterity is not like, I don't have a 12 in dexterity or a 15 in insight. They're measured by dice. So you might have a D8 in dexterity, a D10 in might, a D6 in willpower, and a D8 in insight. And the reason that matters is anytime you make a roll, the Game Master will ask for a combination of 2 attributes. And you can choose the same 2 attributes, which kind of describe how you're doing something. It's like, well, I want to see if I can hack into this computer. Okay, well, you're hacking, so we're going to call part of that is going to be insight. That has stuff to do with intellect and stuff like that. However, this particular computer also has a lot of things that are going to happen very, very fast. So you're going to have to be very quick on your feet to be able to react to it as you're doing your cool movie-style hacking, as opposed to the boring real hacking that it just is really, really boring. So we're also going to call this dexterity. So I want you to roll me dexterity insight. And so you roll those 2 dice, add them together, and see if you roll high enough to succeed in the task. It makes for a very, very interesting game. The other thing that's interesting about this, Fabula Ultima is a class-based RPG, but you can't be a single class. The way that you create your characters is you choose skills from various classes. And you have to start with either 2 or 3 different classes to create your character. And so each one of the characters is a combination of these different abilities and skills that create a unique character. And it can be really, really fun. They give examples of kind of classic or more traditional classes. Like if you wanted to play a ranger, you would probably choose a D10 for your dexterity. Your insight and might will both be D8s. Your willpower would be a D6. And you would take 3 levels of sharpshooter, which would give you ranged weapon mastery and 2 levels of warning shot. And then you would take the wayfarer class for 2 levels to get resourceful and well-traveled. And that will kind of simulate how rangers work in other RPGs. But they also have, other things like a spell fencer or a summoner or a troubadour or a black knight or a gunslinger or a ninja or a pirate or a monster mage or a magic technician. Like, there's so many different things, and you can play in so many different ways. The kind of core rulebook of Fabula Ultima does tend to lend itself a little bit more to your classic JRPG fantasy system, which is what Fabula Ultima is. It's meant to imitate JRPGs. But they have a high fantasy atlas that gives you a little bit more of that high fantasy Lord of the Rings style settings. And they also have a techno fantasy aspect where you're getting a little bit more into things like Final Fantasy VII, Xenosaga, or the Xenoblade Chronicles, any of the Xeno games, stuff like that, where there's a little bit of magic and there's a little bit of technology, and they're coming out with a natural fantasy one, which is going to be a little bit more akin to something like, man, I just completely forgot everything that is natural fantasy, but very nature-based up, very Miyazaki-esque. So, yeah, overall, like, Fabula Ultima, again, plays nothing like D&D, and is just such a refreshing, fun game, and really can uh, allow you to play a lot of different genres. Because if you know JRPGs, there are JRPGs of every single thing. Like I mean, look at the Shadow Hearts series. That's a series set in like the 1920s. It's kind of like a pulp fiction. I can't think of any words right now. Dick Tracy, detective fiction, noir style thing with a little bit of cosmic horror rolled in there. You could definitely play a game in a theme like that using Fabula Ultima. So, anyway, moving on. The next one, we have to talk about it because I'm running a game using this system in this December. The Lancer RPG. Lancer is a mech-based RPG, and again, plays nothing like D&D. And probably the most interesting aspect of this is when you create a character in Lancer, you create two. The first thing you create is your pilot. And the pilot doesn't actually have attributes. They don't have dexterity, agility, stuff like that. What they do have is a background, which will give them a kind of a explanation for why they can do certain things. And then you get a number of what are called triggers. Triggers are short phrases that kind of describe things that your character is very good with. And you start with all these triggers being a +2. So when you make a roll using one of these triggers, you would just add a +2 to it. So some of the triggers that they have: blow something up, assault; survive, apply fists to faces; word on the street, take someone out; patch, pull rank. So short words or phrases that kind of describe things that your character does often, things that they just things that describe ways that they tend to interact with situations, like apply fist to face. Situations where you would use apply fist to face: punch someone in the face or fight the open; brutal unarmed combat, whenever it's a fist fight, a martial arts duel, or a huge brawl; never subtle, clean, or quiet. That's apply fist to faces. And so anytime your pilot would be doing something that involves applying fists to faces, you'd be able to add a +2 to your roll. But again, your pilot is not the only thing you have. You also have a mech. And the mechs in this are really, really cool. They are a combination of a frame, and you have a frame, you have a, oh, come on, this is not difficult. Okay, so pick a frame. You have quote-unquote skills, which are hull, agility, systems, and engineering. So 4 skills, but they only apply when you're piloting your mech. And then you add systems to it, which are basically, either abilities that the mech can use or kind of passive things that allow them to work in different ways. And then you also give them equipment. And there's a generic list of equipment that anyone can use. And as you level up, you can actually unlock new frames and new equipment that are connected to certain frames to create these really unique mechs. And then you get to go to town doing crazy stuff. One of the other things I really like about the Lancer RPG specifically is, unlike D&D, where the most guidance you will get for how to create combat encounters is how to create what's called a balanced combat encounter, which is basically, in D&D 5th edition, they will talk about CR, or challenge rating, which in the 2014 of D&D 5th edition, challenge rating is challenge rating is like the pirate code, more of a suggestion than actual rules. It doesn't really mean all that much. They claim that in the 2024 Monster Manual, challenge rating is going to be worked where it actually means something. As of right now, it's a guideline. And that's really all you are given. And that's true about most tabletop RPGs, is the idea that, okay, well, to create combat encounters, you need to make sure that it's balanced. And then they might talk about things like, well, you can add cover, or, you know, you can have fights out in the open, or you can have fights in rooms and stuff like that. But that's really all they do is it, quote unquote, balanced? Okay, you're good to go. The interesting thing about the Lancer RPG is when you are looking at the GM's toolkit, where it's talking about combat encounters and how to create them, it doesn't just. I'm trying to see non-players building NPC special classes. Is it not there? Is it actually in the combat section? Mech combat. It's somewhere in here. Anyway, so they actually give you examples of different styles of encounters, where it's not just, oh, you go here, look, there's all these bad guys there, and you got to kill them all. They have things like, God, where is it? I know it's in here. I've done this before. I've been learning all of this stuff over and over and over again. Oh, that's what they're called, sit reps. So there's a bunch of different, they call them sit reps, basically different styles of combat encounters. You have control, where it's basically King of the Hill. If you've ever played like any kind of multiplayer shooter, you have 4 different objectives, and you try to have more of your characters on those objectives than the bad guys. And at the end of the round, whoever has more people on that objective gets a point for each objective. There's also escort missions, where you have to take someone and get them to an extraction zone. There are things like just straight up extraction missions, where you're just getting yourself to an objective. There's also holdout, where basically you have a zone that you need to protect, and there's going to be all these enemies coming in to try and take over that one zone. You have to do everything that you can to keep the enemies out. Like, this is something that is uniquely Lancer. I've never seen this in any other tabletop RPG. However, all of these things you can use in any tabletop RPG. To be able to create more interesting encounters. Like, they even have a recon sit rep, where they describe how you could create a recon situation where you're not there to kill things. You're there specifically to get key information, mark targets, things like that. So, yeah. That's what I think, other than the fact that it's a mech combat game, which is really, really cool. I think the sit reps are probably my favorite aspect of it, because it's not just, oh, this is a combat encounter? Well, here's how it's going to go. They go, well, yeah, you can just have enemies and, bad guys and good guys on the field and go to town, but you can also do a lot more than just create a situation where 2 groups have to fight each other, So, yeah, overall, I think it's super, super cool. Moving on. Come on. The next group, probably the easiest RPGs you'll ever play, Lasers and Feelings. Lasers and Feelings is what I call a one-page RPG. I've run a Lasers and Feelings hack, which is basically where someone takes the basic rules of Lasers and Feelings, which is the game format itself is released under a Creative Commons license, so it's 100% legal for you to create your own version of Lasers and Feelings. I actually created my own version myself. It's called Courage and Cuddles, or Cuddles and Courage. I can't remember what I named it. And I actually played it on Zelda Universe, and it was adorable and wonderful. Yeah, Lasers and Feelings is another dice pool based system where you're only using D6, and the game itself is meant to Lasers and Feelings in and of itself is meant to kind of mimic kind of Star Trek, but an extremely simplistic thing. When you create your character, you choose a style, which is alien, android, dangerous, heroic, hotshot, intrepid, or savvy. Choose a role, doctor, envoy, engineer, explorer, pilot, scientist, or soldier. Then you choose a number from 2 to 5. And higher numbers means that your character is more aligned with lasers, which is technology-based stuff. And a lower number means your character is better at doing feelings things, which is intuition, diplomacy, seduction, things like that. And then that's it. You also create a ship in there, but for the most part, like, you can create a character in a couple minutes, and you can be running a game in less than 10 minutes. You can get people that have never played anything before. You can sit them down, and in 10 minutes, you are running a game. And again, it plays nothing like D&D because you don't even use a D20. You only use up to 3d6. That's the maximum you can ever roll. And depending on whether the roll you're making is more lasers focused or feelings focused, you have to roll either higher or lower than your number. If you're making a feelings roll, if you're making a lasers roll, you want to roll under your number, which is why the higher your number, the better you are at doing lasers things. Because, like, if you have a 5 for lasers things, that means a 5 or below is a success for you. And it means when you are using feelings, you want to roll over your number. So if your chosen number is a 2, that means you're very, very good at feelings, and that means a 2 or higher. Whenever you're doing something involving feelings, you're going to succeed. That also means if you put something in the middle, like a 3 or a 4, you're going to have a better chance of succeeding at both, and you're only going to be a little bit more feelings focused or a little bit more lasers focused. So yeah, it's a remarkably simple system, and I have lasers and feelings, but I just closed every single thing I had open, and now I'm upset with myself. I have lasers and feelings, but I also have Library Cats, which is the one that I actually ran, and like I said, I also have a system I created myself called Courage and Cuddles, which is all about being like stuffed animals or security blankets for children and defending them in their dreams. Because that's what I do. Moving on. Due to the fact that I just closed all of the things that I have open, this is going to take slightly longer than I wanted to. Let's do that. Minus. What else did I have in here? Of course I have this. Minus. And I think the next one I did, was just... Okay, so, the ones that I'm going to be focusing on. I only got 3 more. So, the next one we're going to talk about, it's called Masks, A New Generation. And the reason I chose this one specifically is because this is a Powered by the Apocalypse game. If you've never heard that phrase, Powered by the Apocalypse, there is a game system called, what is it called? Apocalypse World. And part of Apocalypse World is either Creative Commons or public domain, something akin to that. They have a license for you to create your own versions of games using the Apocalypse World system, and any game that uses the Apocalypse World system is called Powered by the Apocalypse. They generally will put somewhere in there, I think it's part of the license, for creating this. You have to have somewhere in your game powered by the apocalypse. And Masks, A New Generation, is a powered by the apocalypse game. And again, it plays very differently than D&D. It is not a dice pool system, but it does use 2d6. But the unique thing in general about all powered by the apocalypse systems is they are technically what's called what you could refer to as a class-based system, but your classes are called playbooks. And the unique thing about the playbooks is there we go. I'm going to actually open up some of the playbooks here. So the unique thing about the playbooks, which they call masks, is instead of just being a class, they are an entire kind of description of your character. Like an example, the first mask, the first playbook in Masks, is called the Beacon. And the way that they are described is the heart of the team, low-powered, low angst. They're a hero because they want to be, and they're driven always upward. And then, in Masks specifically, you choose your superpowers, your skills, the things you use as a superhero. And for the Beacon, you can choose 2 of the following abilities: bow and trick arrows, camouflage and stealth, phasing, swords, martial arts, and acrobatics. So a combination of those 2 things kind of describes the powers that your character has. And then everything else about the character comes from talking about their motivation and other things like that. Another powered by the apocalypse game that I thought about including but didn't because it's a license is Avatar Legends. I have run an Avatar Legends game and I've played an Avatar Legends game. They're absolutely wonderful. And the thing that is so much fun about Powered by the Apocalypse games is whenever you want to do something, you use what's called a move. And there's a bunch of generic moves that anyone can do, and then your playbook will give you unique moves. And then depending on which flavor of Powered by the Apocalypse you're using, you may have access to other moves, maybe from your powers or something like that. In Avatar, your combat style, whether it's bending or weapons or technology, gives you access to certain other moves. But the moves, like a really good example, here's one of the Beacon moves. You have a grand total of 6 different Beacon moves that are part of your playbook. You can choose 2 when you create the character. The first one is called Straight Up Creepin'. When you scope out a person or place, roll plus mundane. Mundane is one of your labels. It's one of your attributes. They have 5 of them. And they range from -2 to +3. Thank you, phone. So you roll plus mundane on a 10+, ask 2. On a 7 to 9, ask 1. There's a bunch of different questions there. Things like, what's my best way in and out? What here is worth grabbing? Whose place is this? So when you do that move, it's not like in the D&D where it's like, I cast hit you in the face with a rock, or I use my great hammer to smash you. You know, the moves are generic and are more motivational than they are strictly, this is how it works. Another one, pretty much a superhero. When you bring up your superhero name to someone important for the first time, roll plus savior. On a hit, they've heard of you, say which of your exploits they've heard about and which label they think applies. On a 7 to 9, the GM will tell you something else they've heard and pick a second label they assign to you. On a miss, they don't take you seriously or mistrust you moving forward. So basically, this is you kind of pulling regs. Like, do you know who I am? I am Bowboy. They go, oh, I've heard of Bowboy, and that allows you to do more things. Now, does it specifically say, oh, it gives you a +17 on your charisma checks? No, it just says that they know you, and there's a particular label that they associate with you, and that you can use for more role playing. It is a very narrative focused. This is a style of game, but it is so much fun. I absolutely adore it. Moving on. We got to talk about this one. One of my first non-D&D loves, Open Legend. Open Legend, I believe, is getting close to 10 years old, something like that now. But it was designed as an open source RPG. You can get the entirety of the rules online. If you just type Open Legend into Google, it will take you to the website where they have the entire core book there in a really easy to look through website. Like, you just click on the area you want to go and you can find everything that you want. It's absolutely fantastic. And again, it's 100% open source. It's amazing. But it is what I refer to as a skill-based RPG, where you don't have classes or anything like that. You have a list of, they call them attributes. And I'm going to go to attributes so I can get the full list of attributes. They're here somewhere, aren't they? Where are my attributes? Bonuses and boons. Really? Choose attributes. Okay, so the attributes. They have physical attributes, mental attributes, social attributes, and what they call extraordinary attributes. Physical, agility, fortitude, might. Mental, learning, logic, perception, will. Social, deception, persuasion, presence, which I really love the presence trait. And then extraordinary, alteration, creation, energy, entropy, influence, movement, prescience, which we called prescience, and then protection. Basically what happens is you invest points into these attributes, and that changes the die you use when you roll that attribute. And all rolls, very similar to the Essence 20 system, are D20 plus your attribute die. But one of the things I love about Open Legend is all dice explode. If you roll the highest number on a die, you get to keep that number, then you roll it again. And they just keep exploding over and over again, which is why I think the highest roll we ever had in a game was somewhere in the 60s or 70s, because dice just kept exploding over and over and over again. Your D20 can explode, your attribute dice can explode. And as you get to higher attributes, you start rolling multiple attribute dice. So it becomes really fun. But the other thing that makes this unique is, depending on your level in any one of these attributes, you have access to a number of banes and boons. Banes are debuffs that happen to enemies, and boons are buffs that happen to your allies. And so the whole point of the Open Legend system is you choose attributes to kind of create a character that interacts with the world the way you want, and then to give you kind of mechanical abilities and like powers. You choose boons that kind of fit into your theme. Like, if I wanted to play an ice mage, where I would go, well, my ice mage, I'm going to be like an ice wizard, then I'm going to have a pretty good learning skill. So I'm going to put some points into learning. I'm also going to have a pretty good perception, but I need ice power. So my highest skill is going to be energy, but it's specifically going to be ice energy. And then I'm going to start looking for boons that kind of make sense. Like I'll use where are the boons? Perks and flaws, wealth and good. Banes and Boons, Chapter 3. There we go. Banes and Boons, things like Forced Move, might be something that I use with my Ice Mage, where I create this large kind of block of ice, and I throw it at someone, and I force them to move. Like the ice hits them, and they get blown over. Another one I might use is Immobile, where I literally freeze someone, freeze the ground underneath them to be able to do that. So that's how the Essence 20 system works, is you do a combination of Banes and Boons that create, to give an example of boons, I have to actually go to the boons. things like barrier. If I wanted to create an ice wall, I would use the barrier boon, and it allows me to create a barrier, and I get a bunch of properties. It can be damaging, obscuring, or hindering, depending on the power level of the boon. So all those the things, it makes for a very, very compelling, extremely fun system. Realms of the Wild was the first RPG that I ran for Zelda Universe, and it ran for almost 6 years. And we had so much fun using the Open Legends system. So, yeah. Moving on. I had one more I was going to talk about. We've crossed over the hour mark, so I think I've talked about it enough. Again, the entire purpose of this, I want to introduce people to different RPGs. And I've had a bunch of different, like, discovering new dragons and designing new dragons. That's entirely what those systems, those series were designed to do. But every so often, I just like to do slightly shorter things, where I just list off a bunch of different systems that I like. So, for anyone still here, question for you guys: what is a system that you like that is not D&D? Not just, it's not named D&D, but it doesn't play anything like Dungeons and Dragons. There are a ton more out there that I didn't talk about, just because I was going alphabetically. Things like the World of Darkness series, didn't even mention it, plays very, very different than D&D. It is 100% not D&D. Things like Paranoia, Mutants and Masterminds, all those other things like that. Like, there's tons of other systems out there that just play nothing like D&D. So, do you have a favorite, or maybe not a favorite, but just a system that you're aware of that is not D&D? Let me know in the comments down below. Otherwise, again, it's all for me today. We'll see you guys next time. All right? Bye-bye.